As an artist, art block is the biggest lie you've ever been told. But that comes crashing down today. And as you watch me draw this, learn how your belief in art block only keeps you weak and powerless. But also, what's the real cause? What's really impacting you? And how do you really get past it? Because unlike art block, this will really help you. All right, so here's what it typically presents itself as. You typically sit down and you try something and it doesn't work out. Or you've got this really great idea, but you just feel arrested, like you absolutely cannot go for it, right? Or maybe you tried something and after a little bit, you just dump out and feel like it's just not working. You're just completely blocked by something, right? Well, here's what art block actually does to you. And there's two really negative consequences to believing in this effect. Paramount to this discussion today, you have to just see it for what it is, but it's not real. And here's what I really mean by this. Like, at no point in all my years of being an artist, nor talking to other artists, have I ever heard somebody tell me like, well, Sean, I just sat down to draw it and I really wanted to get after it. And then wouldn't you know it, my tablet just got up and slapped the crap out of me. Nor have I ever heard anybody say, well, here I was going along, I was drawing, and then all of a sudden my paintbrush just stabbed me in the eye and now I gotta wear this eye patch afterwards. But what I want you to understand while I'm being a bit playful with this is to help you realize that this is not an actual phenomenon. It is a perceived event. And unfortunately for artists, this is the most persistent lie that creatives have been told in human history, is that somehow there is this invisible force that's just gonna come over you, envelop you in it, and make you completely unable to be creative. But I'm gonna prove to you in this video why that's actually not the case. And because of that, you need to realize this, is that art block only gives it as much power as you allow it to have over you. The effects of it will only be to the magnitude of which that you allow it to assume control of you. And now, I'm not telling you that what you're feeling isn't real. I'm not telling you that what you actually are wrestling with isn't an actual event, because there is. And listen, by the end of this video, I guarantee you that you are going to be way more enlightened as to what that is and how to tackle it. And that's what I want to really gift you with before you leave this today. Because I guarantee you there's something way beneath the surface that you've never even considered that's actually causing your block. Now, the second effect is going to be something that is particularly nasty and I think often overlooked by most creatives. And I just want to ask you how your belief in any type of force that is completely outside of your control is ever going to help you succeed. And that rolls us into the second biggest issue with the belief in art block as a concept, as a true phenomenon, as an actual event, is that it just reinforces victim mentality. And that's what I want to warn you about, is that you succumbing to this idea of art block will never help you. And you as a creative, you've got great ideas. You have big dreams. You have amazing things that you want to do and make and accomplish, don't you? How is this ever going to help you succeed? And I get it when you get in those zones, you get in those moments where you don't feel like you're creative. And that's when you start to go to that place where you start to believe that there is actually this thing called art block that just siphons your creativity away, right? But hold up, pause on that, because that then entails that you believe that there's actually something that exists out there that can actually turn off your creativity. But here's what I want to let you know, friend, through my extensive years of research on this, is that there's actually no way that you can do that, because creativity is a default mode. Like, we are ingrained born to be creatives, but what happens is that when we become adults, that belief gets beaten out of us, that joy gets taken out of us, and you need to come to understand what are those thieves of that joy that led you to believe that creativity is like a switch that can be turned on and off, rather than it's just something that's always running in the background. And while you're labeling it as an art block, here's what I'm going to propose to you so that you actually understand what's going on right now, is that you don't have an art block. You don't have a creativity block. You have a life block. And why is it easier to just blame your creativity and have your art become collateral damage for what is actually happening in your life right now? And why is that so acceptable? Well, look, I want to tell you this with love as somebody that's helped thousands of artists just like you. And here's the honest truth. It's way easier to just be a victim of some exterior force and circumstance than it is for you to sit and be uncomfortable and to do a deep dive into what is really bothering you. And we're actually trained out of how to do this nowadays. So do you want to know what this actual life block is? Because here's everything that could be for you. Now here's a fun one that I'm sure you're all going to relate to, And I just want to ask you this, like, do you hate your job? Do you feel like you are just constantly performing menial tasks? Do you feel like you're just a drone that's just buzzing around all day? Do you find your mind just wandering all the time and you're wishing you were doing other things, and you're especially caught in this cycle where you're just constantly thinking about what you wish you were doing instead, and that, no, I'd rather not be doing this, but I would rather be doing art? But then here's the ironic part, is that when the time comes for you to make art, all of a sudden you've got no energy and you've been blocked from it. Is this you? So your failure to launch artistically comes, and why does that happen? And I want to let you know that you're actually just fighting a secret war that's masking itself as a creative block. And your true enemy here is that you are instead not battling creativity, friend, but you're battling desire. And I want to let you know why your desire to want to do better things or do things that you feel are more important than what you're currently doing right now is actually killing your creativity. Because first off, you're expending all of this energy, an intense amount of energy, into fighting what's happening right now. And you're like, I don't want to be doing this. This is stupid. I'd rather be doing this. I want to be doing this instead. I want to quit this job. I hate this job. I'd rather be making art. I'd rather be making my comic. I'd rather be working for a company. I'd rather be working for clients, okay? Here's the thing, is that you're taking an insane amount of mental and emotional resources into battling that rather than reserving that for when you actually need it later. If you think of this like a car, you wake up in the morning and you've got a full tank, and then by the end of the day, you've been fighting desire so much that you're practically on E and running on fumes by the time that you get back, and it's actually time for you to sit down and be creative. This can not just only be at work though too, it's gonna also be for, I don't know, are you a parent? Because I'm just gonna be real honest with you, there's a lot of times where it's like I'm dealing with some kid having a tantrum in my house, and like, I'd rather be doing this, or I'd rather be making that. And that's okay, like there's nothing to feel guilty about. That's just something that we naturally experience as a human. But you're probably wondering now, like, what is my fix for this, and how do I get through this? First off, I just want you to consider this is like, what can you do with what you're currently doing to make it a little bit more bearable and something that you're not gonna wholly hate and therefore fight against. Like, just for example, let's go back to my parenting example. Let's say that your kids are just totally freaking out and you need to go ahead and you obviously need to take care of that situation, but then what do you do afterwards? Maybe you can get them involved in some creative efforts. Maybe you can get them involved in some artwork. I've done this with my kids, like where we'll sit down and we'll follow along like a YouTube art video after a character that they like to watch from their favorite show. If you're at work, hey, can you personalize your space? Or have you ever noticed, especially those of you that have like an office, you have a cubicle, a desk or something, how many people that have been there for a long time, they personalize their entire space? Why is that? Because when you feel you have ownership of it, you feel less resistance to sitting down and working there and performing there. And let me just ask you this too, what can you start to do to prepare yourself for art when you have those moments of rest, when you have those moments where there's absolutely nothing to do? Can you look up references? Can you look at inspirational pictures? Can you start to prepare for the project that you actually want to do rather than fight against the fact that you're not doing it right now? Because the last thing I want you to do is to get home and realize that you're just running on fumes and your art future dies on the road with it. The next phantom cause of art block has to deal with this, and I want you to be real honest with yourself here. What are you doing instead of doing art? Because I guarantee you, you are not just sitting on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, doing absolutely nothing for hours. You're doing something else, aren't you? And that brings in the real culprit of your creativity, and it is this force that is ever present in what we do, but especially for creatives, and it is called resistance. It really comes to light in this book called The War for Art from Steven Pressfield, which I'm just gonna recommend is a must read for all creatives because he details all of the different resistances that artists experience, and it definitely influenced a lot of this video you're watching today. So on this topic, I want to ask you, when you start to sit down and you start to say to yourself, either out loud or interiorly, I can't create, I just don't feel it, I have no ideas. Okay, pause, stop. You say that, and then you do what? What are you running to instead? Because when you really sit down and you see what that is, what are you going to? Are you going to play video games? Are you going doom scrolling? Are you watching funny videos? Are you immediately running to do something else that's going to give you an instant boost? Well, then that's the real problem right there, is that your distractions are actually the biggest issue that you're feeling right now. All of those, that's just you battling those compulsions for fun and instant gratification over your creative efforts. So here's just a base question you want to ask yourself every single time that you go away from art and you start to feel art blocked is this: are you chasing happiness, which is a fleeting momentary feeling, or are you going to instead chase fulfillment, which has a longevity component, it has a long draw component to it? And just to give you a personal example for this, like there have been a lot of times where as I'm going through and I'm building my art business and I'm working with clients, and I realize that like there are certain things that I feel compelled to, like I feel compelled to play video games like all the time, and I love it, and I can literally sit down for like days and do it. However though, I also just came off of a big bout where I was doing a lot of things, I was focusing on a lot of projects, and I totally gave up playing video games for 4 months just to do it because it mattered to me more. And then when life opened up and I had a little bit more time, I could play for a little bit here or there. So what I'm going to urge you to do is, instead of you just running to that knee-jerk reaction, is to identify that crutch activity. And then the next time that maybe you get yourself up and you go to do it, just pause and be like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Why do I feel compelled to do this right now? And ask yourself this: is this going to bring me closer to where I want to go or further away from where I'm supposed to be? The next reason you might be struggling is that you haven't hit that like and subscribe button, because I'm here to deliver content like this to you every single week designed to help you grow yourself, grow your art, and grow your art business. If you're on board with that, please make sure that you do that. And hey, if this is helping you, please share with someone that you know and love. And then also watch out for this. All right, so here comes the first one, and let me start you off with this. Every single time that you start to create art, or when you start to create art, do you immediately fall into thoughts of inadequacy, avoidance, maybe a little bit of anxiety about it? And I just want to push you to ask yourself this: where are your thoughts trailing to? Where are they going? So the reality of when you're feeling this way and when you feel like you can't perform creatively, what you're actually experiencing is you have your creativity time invaded by some type of life circumstance. Because oftentimes, way too often, I find that we are instead blaming our art instead of really closely examining our social emotional states. So what could this be? It could have been you had an argument with a loved one or a friend. It could be that you had a bad day at work. You could maybe be in a perpetually bad relationship. Or maybe you're just in a poor environment right now that doesn't help foster your creative efforts. The big issue that this creates though, is that when you're not actually looking at, oh, is this circumstance making me stop right now because my mind is on this and not on my art, is that you start to form an adversarial bond with your artwork. And this will definitely not serve you, my friend. My advice for you, y'all, is that if you're feeling like you absolutely cannot handle any type of creative effort, you have to address the root problem. And that's not going to be easy all the time too, and it's definitely not going to be fast. It's not going to have a quick resolution all the time, okay? But you can't shy away from maybe having hard conversations with people, or you really examining what you're doing to help perpetuate that circumstance as well. And overall, just tackling what that real circumstance is that is actually negating your ability to perform at the highest, most effective artistic level. And my ultimate advice for you on this one is that if you're going through rough circumstance, I have nothing but love and empathy for you, my friend, because we all have to experience that negative component of the human condition. But as it's been for me in my life, I want you just to consider instead, what if art was your freedom? What if it's your liberation from that? What if it's your catharsis and your therapy for it too? Because what I propose for you is to take back that personal power, to take back the freedom that you used to gain from it. Because right now, that power has been stolen, misplaced, and then given to something that is way outside of art. Because if you don't regain that power that's been lost, stolen, or misplaced into a circumstance, then you risk losing to them and losing your art too. Next, I want to let you know why you're currently caught up in a web, and you're stuck alongside your art and every other joyful idea that you have. Now, considering that the whole purpose for you sitting down is that you actually do enjoy it and it brings you joy, or you feel like right now it's not, or at least in this very moment, it doesn't. Your mind starts to wander, your mind starts to go into some dark places. I want to let you know that instead of you experiencing a art block, what you're actually experiencing is a spiral into negative thought patterns. This is commonly experienced by artists, especially those prone to sensitivities in bouts of low emotional states. And listen, I've been there too. I've been in those dark places and I've pulled myself out of it. And I know that you're going to be able to do that too. But the hard thing is for you to go from this place where you're at a really low state into a really high productive state. And this is when every single fear, every single doubt comes into play, because what you're actually feeling is despair. And it's actually when you're starting to really doubt yourself. It's when the imposter syndrome kicks in. And it's when you start to have every single thought erupt while you're starting to create art or when you're about to create art. And it just arrests you completely. And listen, when you're posing art, all that creativity that you have that maybe comes naturally to you every single moment that you're not doing it, it just seems siphoned from you, doesn't it? But then think about this though. How is you giving into those thoughts ever going to bring you to a better place? Because staying in your poor mental health condition right now will never help you, will never help you succeed, and will only perpetuate that cycle. And so now you're naturally like, well, what do I do? Well, listen, I'm definitely gonna tell you what not to do later. That's coming soon. But look, if this is chronic for you, I definitely recommend that first off, you need to maybe look into some professional resources, you need to get into some help programs, and that's all great too. But what you can start to do outside of all that is listen, just start to examine what is the emotional trigger that you're feeling and why is that making you feel that way. And here's the most important piece of advice I can give you if you're caught into this right now is that just ask yourself, what do I need to do right now to elevate my state? What do I need to do right now that's going to produce a burst for me that's going to bring it back to me, okay? And I'm speaking about this in a way that's not going to, again, distract you. Don't sit down and play video games for 4 hours and say that it helped your emotional state, because it won't. It just helps you run away from it further. Instead, really think about what that's going to be, and I've got some suggestions for you coming soon. And at the core of this, we just have to understand this, that if you abandon your art for your emotional state, you lose twice and you suffer twice. Do you really want that? Now, you never want to be plagued by art block again, because listen up. And I want to let you know that the worst beast that you'll ever battle for creativity is the one that you raise yourself, and here's what it is. And to give you an example of this, y'all, do you ever play video games that have branching decisions? Like I'm talking about, like if you've ever played like Mass Effect or any of those types of games where every single moment that you have a conversation with somebody, you've got like 4 different options. What if you could know everything that's going to happen and everything that you're going to do and what that's going to lead to? That's what we love about those games. And what if you could do that in life too? Because oftentimes what I tend to notice a lot of artists do is that we are really fantastic at making momentary decisions. And what I generally tend to steer people towards is this thought process here when they're struggling with this is what you're doing right now. Is this building positive momentum or is it building negative momentum? And here's what I want to ask you. The next time that you sit down, you're just like, I can't. Okay, ask yourself this. Is this a 4-minute decision where in the next 4 minutes, I'm going to get some instant gratification, doing something else, going someplace else, engage in some other activity? Or is this a decision where, how about in 4 years, how am I going to feel? Because if you do it right now, I guarantee you in 4 years, you're going to keep doing it. What is your life going to be like if you continue to build this habit where you just give up every single time that you don't feel it right then, and you just continue that? Well, in 40 years, you're going to be feeling the exact same way that you currently do right now, because what you're currently arrested by is the effect of negative inertia. So what I want to warn you about is that right now, you are currently seduced by right now, because right now you might not be feeling it. Right now you feel like it's just not coming easily to you, and then right now you are feeling like there's something else that you should be doing right now, right? And that's what starts negative inertia. And when we talk about inertia, what I'm specifically stating is the momentum you gain from one task that begins to also transfer into another task. In a similar way, when you don't do a task, it builds another excuse for you not to start another task, and then builds another excuse not to start the next task, so on and so forth. And just to serve you up a real big honesty pill right now, you know what you should be doing. Like, it's not hard to sit down and figure out, like, look, this is everything I need to do to go in the direction I want to and to be successful with my art. But the issue is that you're not doing it. Not because you're incapable, not because you're inept, it's because you're not actively moving towards it. And your lack of doing is actually your lack of becoming. Have you ever considered that? So to combat this, what I generally like to recommend people do is to engage in task vomit. It's a wonderful term, isn't it? But basically, here's what you want to do is you want to take a look at what you want to do, whatever that plan is, okay? And just literally write down like every single task associated with it, every single minor, minuscule task. And then that becomes sort of a checklist for you. And you can do it in any order you want, okay? But the biggest thing is for you to chunk down everything that you're doing. Because just to be honest with you, our brains cannot handle unspecific and extremely long-term and undefined goals. And if you want to build yourself into the person, I want you to consider this. Because Miyamoto Musashi once said that you have to kill your current self in order to build the self that you want to have. And I don't mean that in an extreme way, but let's just be honest. We've all got parts of us that are just not helping us, that are toxic, and that we need to dump because there's only so much room in that vessel of a body you've got, right? So let me ask you this, like what habits and actions are currently destroying your potential? Now I'm gonna concede in this video that there is one block that is actually real, and there is one force that is actually tangible, preventing you from actually taking any action. And this effect, this force over your future, is often wholly disregarded, is often overlooked, and in times it's even weirdly glorified for artists. What I'm talking about is poor physical health. Is this you, by the way? And look, this is easily mislabeled as creative block, but you're literally blocked by your biology. There's something going on internally inside of you that is preventing you from taking action as you normally should. I recently did a video on when you think you're too tired to create art, and people did bring this one up, and I didn't get a chance to address it then, so I definitely want to address it now and give it a lot of legitimacy. But listen, it's also not something that's going to totally destroy your future either, because it is a manageable circumstance. Because all of these, they are to be monitored and maintained. Like when you have an illness, if you have a chronic disease, if you have a perpetual ailment for you, there's nothing you can do that is necessarily going to cure something that's just going to be a part of your life, is going to be a part of your biology. I concede to that 100%. But here's what I want to urge you to consider though, is that if you have that, how do you work with it rather than against it? And I want to urge you to consider that because remember that resistance is the killer of your creativity, not a block. For those of us that don't suffer from chronic issues and chronic illnesses and all that, here are some really simple things that you might want to consider. Do you have really consistently poor sleeping habits? Do you have a terrible crap diet where you're just eating junk food all the time? Do you have a nutrient deficiency too? Are you eating food that's like always takeout, always fast food? You get it from the convenience store all the time because your body is literally dying inside from you not getting what it needs in order to produce energy. Also, here's a really big thing, but like lack of water. So many people don't drink water nowadays, and it's literally 75% of your entire body's composition. And if you're not feeding it right there, you're dehydrated, and the effects of dehydration are, guess what? Lethargy, and that's what's also killing your creativity. Along with that too, do you maybe never step outside? Are you never exercising? There's loads of things that you can do that can fix this. And I want to focus you into meeting your needs. Like, do you have a vitamin deficiency? How about investing into some supplements? How about you get a blood lab and see what exactly you're missing from that? Do you need exercise? Can you go ahead and look on YouTube? Like you can literally find 15-minute workouts that will literally get you sweating and your heart racing on there. Do you need more water? Get one of those big jugs that tell you exactly what time of the day that you're supposed to be intaking it by. Drop the junk food. Go outside every once in a while. It's a great, beautiful world out there. Because y'all, you gotta take care of your vessel before it breaks and cannot hold your creativity any longer. Now, riding the coattails of the last real art block, this one is also definitely not an imaginary one, and I'm gonna take this one with the most utmost severity and sincerity in explaining this one to you. And I wanna ask you this, how are you supposed to operate at peak performance in your creative efforts if you are feeling threatened right now? And what I'm talking about here are when you have ever-present, sustained mortal threats. So for example, if you live in a horribly unsafe environment, if you're experiencing homelessness, long-term or short-term, if you have a lack of food, if you're in an unsafe relationship, or if your caretaker is somebody that is wholly neglecting you too, these are all threats to your humanity. And it's very difficult to perform at peak levels that you want to be at naturally, right? When your mortality is perhaps at risk. And this can even be something that isn't long-term, but short-term too. Like just as an example, in the area I live in the United States, there was recently a hurricane and it dumped 20 inches of water on my area, and people have been evacuated, put into shelters, put into hotels. The National Guard's been here. So even natural disasters can produce that type of trauma where mortality for the moment is threatened, and then therefore it's kind of hard to think about anything else when you're like unclothed and you don't have food and you don't have a stable living environment. And this all goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which basically states that if you address the main human concerns, then everything else is allowed to happen afterwards. And I think about this because there's a lot of artists that are living in really terrible conditions right now. And when you're into that, I just want you to understand that it's okay for you to take a pause for a little while or take a pause for a day, because you have to address that. Like if you have no energy because you have no food and you don't have safe shelter, or you don't have access to everything because of your very unfortunate circumstances, that's real, but it's not an art block. That is, again, a life block, and it's a block via a mortality threat. Are you experiencing this? Because I certainly hope not, but if you are, I just want to shine some light on it and give some credence to it, and I really hope that it improves soon. Now this next one, I'm gonna say all of this with absolute love, with absolute sensitivity as much as I can, but also I'm gonna need to give you some tough love on this one because I see this one all the time. Typically when I talk to a lot of artists, okay, we're definitely prone to a lot of mental health concerns, and we're prone to things like anxiety, depression. We also have a high amount of people that have neurotypical concerns, like they have ADHD or they have autism or something else that makes them neurodivergent. And I definitely want to encourage you, first off right now, is that that's not going to be why you can't perform as an artist, why you can't be successful as an artist. And I'm going to preface everything I'm about to say by telling you that when I was a young child, I was diagnosed with so many of the things that I'm speaking about. And when I see so many artists do, and I used to do the same thing too, so I know what you're going through, but you used to probably say things like, oh, I can't do this because I have this, and I won't do this because I have this, and it's just not possible for me because I have this. And I used to say all these things too. And I see so many people battling for their diagnosis. But the unfortunate side effect is that I tend to see a lot of artists that run to the excuse of their diagnosis for a reason why they feel art blocked. And look, the hardest part about dealing with any type of mental health concern, especially one that is properly diagnosed by a professional, and especially one if you are taking medication to help you regulate it so that you can be healthy and that you can be an active and productive person, is that all too often you're told by professionals what you can't do. You can't do this, you can't do that, you don't operate like this, you don't operate like that. And what it starts to become is basically like people are giving you an instruction manual to something that's not you. It's almost like if you bought a TV and it's an instruction manual and a remote to a different model and a different brand that's not you. And what I want to just encourage you to do is to instead think about that, challenge that, and instead reconsider, is that really the case? Or is that just what I'm being told, and therefore I'm developing a hard belief system on it that's going to take me out of what I actually want to do? But here's the thing, y'all, it's not going away, and it's not going to change. So you can either fight it, like trying to fight a current, or you can work with it. And another thing I'm going to ask you to consider too is that even though you might be neurodivergent in some type of way, and that you might have a diagnosis that tells you that it's difficult for you to do things, it's not impossible unless you think it is so. And just as an example here, like if you have ADHD, the most common excuse I hear is, oh, I can't focus because I have ADHD. And that's wholly wrong. Actually, when you have ADHD, it's not that you can't focus, it's that you can't focus on tasks of which you deem to be uninteresting or meaningless for you. So I just want to ask you this, are you just using that as a blanket excuse, or is art meaningless and therefore uninteresting to you? Because you can't have it both ways with that. And then the other thing I would ask you to consider as well is this: are you running for a diagnosis as a distraction from it? Because just one, I would say, really toxic mindset that I see really prevalent in the art community is that if you have difficulty, and I see this all the time in comments of videos, I see it in mine too, where people express that they have difficulty performing, they have difficulty staying artistic, they have difficulty staying creative, And then they immediately want to run and go get diagnosed with something. Like, oh, you must have ADHD. Oh, I used to do that too. I used to have it, and I have anxiety. And then the worst thing too is when I see people running for a prescription. Like I literally had somebody in my comment, I deleted it because I thought it was horrible and I didn't want anybody to ever read it or consider it. They actually recommended that somebody go ahead and get Prozac because they weren't feeling creative. That is so bad. That is so wrong. Why is your first instinct to just go ahead and run to mess with your biology, to put chemicals into your system for it? They are not the end all be all. They're not going to solve the problem. You need exterior help and resources in order to do that. And if you're just running for a diagnosis because you feel like you can't sit down and pay attention, so you're naturally going to think that you have ADHD, another statistic that I recently read that was pretty alarming, I read this in a scientific journal, is that roughly 80% of all ADHD cases are misdiagnosed. Look, the hardest part I fully understand about coming to the realization that you can work through it, not against it, is that you have to challenge what you've been told that you can't do. And then a lot of it does have a lot of validity to it too, where maybe you can't do it one way, that doesn't mean that you're just damned to not do it at all. What it instead means, what I want to offer you the opportunity to reconsider is this, friend. Who is somebody in the world who is doing what you want to do at a higher level than you're currently doing, that is currently struggling right now with exactly what you have or a worse version of what you have, and they've been able to figure it out? So then I offer this to you. You can do it too. But your perception that this is your excuse is not going to serve you long term unless your objective here is to never make art again. And I say this because that's what I had to also overcome in my childhood in order to get to where I am right now. Now I want to ask you this big one. Do you hear voices like all the time? And look, I'm not talking about your voice. I'm talking about other people. And I want to ask you, what are those voices saying to you? Are they telling you that art is worthless? You can't pursue it. That's not what we do. People around you don't do that. You're going to be homeless. You're going to be jobless. Oh, AI can do that better. No, men don't do that, or women don't do that, or that's not your place, or oh, that's dead. Are you being told that art is childish, that it's time to grow up? Oftentimes, and tell me if you've ever experienced this down below, that when you're working on your artwork, do you ever notice how these thoughts just kind of fly in, that when you're working creatively, that maybe you didn't realize this, but you're actually doing really deep work. It's deep human work, because when you're creating, you're actually exploring your interiority. And therefore, when you are experiencing a block and you typically stop, it's typically because of the fact, not that you want to, but it's because of the fact that you start to feel invaded. You're invaded by all these voices of all these people that are just not helping you. And typically when you're surrounded by a circle of jerks that are telling you all the time that everything that you're doing is not going to be worthwhile, you start to have that bout of imposter syndrome. You have to start to have that doubt. You start to have that anxiety. And then when you make a mistake, when your drawing doesn't come out right, when it doesn't start to immediately look the way that you want it to, or it starts to go through the ugly phase, this is when you start to feel reinforced by what they've said and you start to doubt yourself. Am I talking to you? Am I reading your brain right now? One of the most important things I'm going to encourage you to do is to safeguard your thoughts, and also really safeguard yourself around the people that you are choosing to keep a circle with. Because every single micro failure that you have, which you're going to have loads of failure along your way to artistic success, is going to produce the effect where you're going to hear the echo of somebody that gave you a reason to stop, pause, and to give up your art. Now, I also need to ask yourself this: are you being a jerk to yourself because you need to evict that tenant that is living rent-free in your head? If you're putting yourself down, if you're constantly telling yourself that you suck, that you're not good enough, you're not talented, all of these things, they start to become a belief system in you that will never help you. And then every single time that you try and be creative and oopsie daisy, one thing doesn't go right, or maybe one artwork doesn't look to your expectation, well, guess what? Then you validate yourself. And that's why it's not real. It's just a phenomenon that you invent because you are the progenitor of that feeling of inadequacy that made you stop, not an art block. And I just want to ask you to reconsider this, my friend, okay? Is that even if you're not in the best circumstances, and yeah, like all artists, we're not born like with silver spoons in our mouths, okay? And we definitely battle with some things that some people don't. And there are some of us that are born way more fortunate. Like, I'm just gonna say it, like I would probably have a way better channel if I was like gorgeously attractive and younger and stuff, but hey, I'm not. I'm here and I'm trying to help you all as best as I can. But because of that, I think that too, you have to realize that that could be the reason, not why you fail, but every reason that you think you could fail could be the reason that you succeed if you just are able to reframe it like that. And just to give you a hot take, go ahead and remove the people in your life that reinforce your negative thought patterns and your negative belief system in yourself as often and as quickly as possible, because that will instantly allow you to actually step into the role that you were born to be, that you want to be, and then you're actually going to be able to labor towards. How's that? Now, one of the worst things that you can actually feel a block from has to do with, again, something that you're running to instead. And what I'm specifically talking about here are the vices that you choose. Now listen, we all have vices. We all have things that we feel compelled to do that we seemingly don't even have to think about. We just go right towards it. We go right towards this, and we always get sucked into that. And we know it's not healthy for us, but we choose to engage in it instead. Is this you? Because if so, I made an entire video about toxic art addictions right here. It's gonna help you identify and work through it. Go ahead, check it out, and if this helped you, share it with somebody that you know. See you next time.